Last year, my friend and I were heading to my cousin's village in my old van. It was a long drive, but I was excited. I kept telling him how peaceful the village was, how different it felt from the noise and rush of the city. We were both in a good mood, laughing, talking. I remember the sun was beginning to set as we neared the coast. The sky looked soft and golden. That's when it started. We were driving along a stretch near the beach when I heard a faint clicking sound from the back of the van. It wasn't loud, just enough to catch your attention. I thought maybe something had come loose, a bolt, maybe something rolling around in the trunk. I pulled over, got out, checked everything I could. Nothing. The tires were fine, the undercarriage looked normal, and there was nothing in the back that could have made that noise. It was weird, but I shrugged it off and got back in. We hadn't driven more than 5 minutes before the clicking came back, this time a little louder. It was rhythmic, almost like a metronome. I stopped again. My friend and I both got out and checked thoroughly. Still nothing. At that point, I started to feel a little uneasy. Not scared, just off. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I told him I'd sit in the back while he drove, thinking maybe I could pinpoint the sound better. And as he drove, nothing. Total silence. I sat there staring at the back doors, half expecting something to move. But it didn't. After a few minutes, I figured maybe whatever it was had stopped. I climbed back into the passenger seat. Almost as soon as I did, the engine died. Just like that. No warning, everything shut off. The van wouldn't start again. No clicking, no lights, just silence. We tried everything. Checking the battery, the fuse box, fuel. Everything looked fine. It just wouldn't turn on. That stretch of road was completely empty. Not a single car passed by the whole time. It was like we dropped out of the world somehow. I joked about it being a zombie apocalypse, but it didn't even make us laugh. Then we saw someone, an old man, walking slowly along the side of the road, holding a stick. He didn't look surprised to see us. He didn't smile. Just walked up to the van, leaned in a little and said, "Push it up to the end of the highway. Try again there." I asked him what he meant. He just repeated it, nodded, and kept walking. A few seconds later, he was gone, into the woods beside the road. We didn't even see him enter. He just wasn't there anymore. There wasn't much choice. We pushed the van down the road. It wasn't far, maybe 100 meters or so. And when we reached this faded highway banner with peeling letters, I turned the key one last time. It started. The engine came to life like nothing had ever happened. We drove straight to the nearest mechanic, not saying a word. The guy checked everything. "Your van's in great shape," he said. "Honestly, it's kind of weird how clean it is for its age." I couldn't stop thinking about that stretch of highway. I don't even remember passing any towns before or after it, and when I tried looking it up later, I couldn't find it on the map. Not exactly where I remembered it. Sometimes I think maybe the van didn't break down. Maybe we did. And maybe that old man wasn't there to help us fix the van. Maybe he just wanted us to leave. It was the fall of 2019, the year I graduated. As a farewell gesture, our teacher arranged a trip for our class. After some voting and a lot of excitement, the decision was made. We were going to Alaska in October, right before the snow would get too deep. Everyone was thrilled. So was I, or at least I thought I was. That morning, I packed my things and went to the bus station where we were all supposed to meet. Everyone was already there, laughing, joking, taking pictures. It should have felt like a perfect send-off, but for some reason, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. I was there, smiling, nodding, but I wasn't really there. I felt disconnected, like a background character in my own story. The bus ride was fine. I stared out the window most of the way, watching the trees thin out and the snow start to settle on the ground. It was beautiful, almost unreal, but I still couldn't enjoy it. Something inside me felt wrong, like I was forgetting something important or remembering something I never wanted to. By the time we reached our destination, the sun was setting behind the mountains. Our teacher informed us that we'd be hiking into the nearby mountain trails the next morning. "It's part of the adventure," he said. I remember thinking it sounded like a terrible idea. Hiking in the snow in October, but no one else seemed to mind. The next day, everyone split into groups to hike together. A few of my friends called out to me, told me to join them. I just shook my head. I didn't want to be around anyone. I needed to be alone, so I walked. I didn't even realize how far I had gone until the laughter of the others faded completely. The air got thinner, colder. I wasn't following a trail, I was just moving, pulled by something I didn't understand. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of a small snow-covered cave tucked beneath a ridge. It wasn't marked. It didn't even look like it had been discovered before, but something about it drew me in. I cleared some of the snow around the entrance. As I did, I began to hear a low humming. It was soft, rhythmic, almost like someone singing under their breath. I froze. It sounded like a girl. Despite the snow outside, the cave was faintly illuminated from within. There was no fire, no torch, just a strange bluish light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of it. Then she screamed, a sharp, blood-curdling scream from inside the cave. My whole body locked up. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The cold pressed in around me, and I felt like I had been dropped into ice water. I don't remember how long I stayed like that. When I finally moved, I turned and ran, slipping on the snow, hitting the ground hard. My head slammed against a rock, and blood started mixing with the snow. Somehow, I made it back to the bus. My teacher found me. He said I was burning up with fever. They cleaned my wound and gave me some medicine. I don't remember much after that. I took the last seat on the bus and slept the rest of the trip. I didn't join any more hikes. I didn't speak much. I just kept thinking about that cave. Was it real? Was it the fever? A hallucination brought on by sickness and isolation? I still don't know, but sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I hear that same humming, faint, almost melodic. I try to convince myself it's just in my head, but I never really believed it. Last summer, during the holidays, my whole family decided to go on a road trip. We rented a house van, one of those cozy mobile homes that lets you live on the move, and hit the highway. Our destination was the beach. We were all looking forward to it. Everyone was in a good mood. It felt like the kind of trip we'd remember for years. That night, we stopped near a small, unfamiliar village to rest. The area seemed quiet, surrounded by thick woods. We were all exhausted, so we parked the van off the road and decided to sleep inside for the night. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up. I don't know why. Maybe it was just the stillness, or maybe it was something else. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out. There was something moving between the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of the moonlight. But no, it was a shadow. Slow, long, gliding between the trunks like it was watching. My first thought was a wild animal. A wolf, maybe even a tiger. The kind of fear that crawls into your chest before your brain catches up, set and fast. What made it worse was the van itself. It had wide glass windows all around, barely tinted. And honestly, they didn't look strong enough to hold back anything serious. I imagined claws or teeth smashing through them like nothing. I shook my dad awake and whispered what I saw. He looked tired and unconcerned. "Probably stray dogs," he said. "Besides, wolves don't come alone." He chuckled, rolled over. I didn't feel reassured, but I was too tired to argue. I lay back down, still tense, and eventually drifted off again. Not for long. A loud thud jolted me awake. Then another. It sounded like someone was hitting the side of the van. Hard. I sat up, heart pounding. My mom was already awake, sitting stiffly. Her skin looked pale, almost yellow in the low light. My younger brother and sister were curled into each other, scared and silent. My dad was at the wheel, trying to start the engine. Over and over, the van sputtered but didn't come alive. "What's happening?" I asked, groggy, confused. "Just look outside," my dad said, voice low and tight. I did. And nothing. Nothing was there. Not a person, not a dog, not even a branch swaying. Just darkness and trees. But the banging didn't stop. It kept coming. Louder, more frequent. The entire van began to rattle. The glass windows were vibrating violently, and I was convinced they'd shatter if this kept going. My mind was spinning. My body felt heavy, like I was underwater. Every instinct told me to run, but there was nowhere to go. I climbed toward the front, near the driver's seat, and opened the compartment under the passenger side, where the battery connections were. The wires had come loose. My hands were shaking, but I managed to reconnect them. I turned the key one more time, and finally the engine roared to life. We didn't wait. I pressed the accelerator and we pulled out onto the road, heading straight for the highway, leaving that village behind. No one spoke. No one even looked back. The banging had stopped the moment the van moved. We drove until we saw signs of life again, until streetlights and gas stations began to appear. I asked my dad later if he saw anything out there. He didn't answer. None of us really wanted to talk about it. We cut the trip short and went home the next morning. No one said it directly, but we all felt it. Whatever that was, we weren't meant to see it. Or maybe it had seen us. To this day, I don't know what was outside the van that night, and I don't think I want to. I was around 10 when my father took me to see a house his friend was building. He said it would be a vacation home, tucked deep in the forest. I didn't know why anyone would want to spend their holidays in a place so far away from everything, but my father seemed excited. I was just happy to go on a drive with him. We arrived at dusk. The sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving a cold blue tint on everything. The house wasn't finished, just a bare gray structure, all cement walls and hollow spaces. It smelled of dust and concrete, the skeleton of a home. We went inside. A single old bed had been dragged into the middle of what would one day be a living room. There was one dim lamp standing near it, powered by a noisy generator that buzzed like it was trying to stay awake. My father's friend, tall, talkative, always smiling too wide, insisted on showing him the big master bedroom upstairs. My dad hesitated. He looked at me, then at the uneven staircase and told me gently to sit tight. "Just for a few minutes," he said. He asked one of the workers to stay with me. The worker nodded, sat beside me for maybe 5 minutes, said something I didn't quite catch, then walked out to his truck. I thought he'd be back, but his headlights faded into the trees, and I realized he wasn't coming back. So I sat there, alone, just a kid in an unfinished house in the middle of the forest. The lamp flickered, casting long, thin shadows on the raw concrete walls. Everything smelled old and damp. I tried to stay calm, but something about the silence felt wrong, like the forest was holding its breath. That's when I saw it. Out beyond the frame where a window would eventually go, deep in the tree line, stood a figure, perfectly still, watching. It didn't move. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. It was gone, or maybe it was never there. I told myself it was just a shadow or a branch, but I was already scared. Then came the howl, high-pitched, close. 2 wolves burst from the woods and began fighting right there in front of the structure. They weren't just snarling, they were lunging at each other, claws and teeth flashing in the lamp's flicker. I dove behind the bed, trying not to scream. I was too afraid to move, too afraid to call for help. I curled into myself and prayed my dad would come back. But it got worse. One of the wolves began sniffing around the bed. Its padded steps echoed in the silence. I pressed myself into the shadows. My breath was trapped in my throat. And then I peeked. It was standing there, looking straight at me. We locked eyes. It wasn't foaming or snarling, just staring. And then slowly, it lowered its front legs, raised its back, the way animals do right before they leap. I froze. That's when the gunshot cracked through the night. A single bang, loud enough to shatter the stillness. The wolf jolted, then turned and bolted into the woods. My father's friend stood by the doorway, holding a shotgun, still aimed in the air. My father ran over to me, knelt down, tried to calm me. He was acting like everything was fine, like I hadn't just been face to face with something wild and dangerous. He said I was brave, said it was nothing, but his voice trembled. We never talked about it again. The next day, we went home early. My father gave a vague excuse to my mother about unexpected problems with the property. I didn't correct him. Even now, years later, I still remember those eyes, the way they held mine. Not like prey, not even like curiosity, just something watching from a place where humans don't belong. And sometimes, when I'm deep in the woods or even just walking past an unfinished building, I feel it again, like something's still out there, waiting. My brother is a caver, one of those people who finds peace crawling through places most of us would call claustrophobic nightmares. He's always trying to convince me there's beauty in the dark. Last year, he talked me into joining him on a trip to Mammoth Cave. He called it an adventure. I was skeptical, but he was so sure I'd love it. We joined a large group and entered the cave with a park guide leading the way. The air grew cooler and heavier as we moved deeper underground. At first, I'll admit, I was amazed. The shapes, the echoes, the surreal beauty of the stone formations. It all felt ancient and untouched. We were taking photos, talking, laughing. That's probably when it happened. We lost track of the group. At first, it didn't feel serious. The trails are marked, right? There are people everywhere. We thought we'd just backtrack and catch up, but we kept walking, and the cave changed. The walls got narrower. The path turned slick. The air smelled different, thicker, like wet soil and something metallic underneath. That's when we stepped into an enormous cavern. It wasn't on any part of the tour I remembered. A wide underground river cut through the chamber, slow and black and quiet. Something about it felt wrong. I couldn't explain it, but I didn't want to be there. We shouted for help. Nothing. Just our voices echoing into the distance like they were being swallowed. We scanned the dark with our flashlights, and then we saw it. A figure, far across the river. Not moving, just standing. My brother called out. No response. We waved our lights toward it, hoping it was someone from the group, maybe another lost hiker. But the figure didn't respond, didn't even flinch. That's when my brother said, "Let's cross." I told him no. Every instinct I had screamed to stay put, but he was already wading in, so I followed. The current wasn't strong, but the water was freezing. It bit through our clothes and turned my legs numb. The rocks were slick and uneven. It felt like the river didn't want us crossing, but we made it to the other side. The figure was gone. There were no footprints, no voices, nothing but the sound of water dripping and a growing hum in the air. Low and constant, like a vibration beneath the stone. We stood there, soaked and shivering, unsure of where to go next. Then we noticed the cave walls. They were covered in markings, not carvings or graffiti, but patterns. Long spirals, handprints too high to reach, shapes that didn't make sense. They weren't recent. They looked ancient. Wrong. I turned to my brother. His face was pale. His mouth moved like he was trying to say something, but no sound came out. Then his flashlight flickered and died. Mine followed seconds later. We were in total darkness. That's when we heard footsteps. Not ours. Something soft, slow, careful, coming from the river. We ran. I don't know how we found a path. Maybe instinct, maybe luck, maybe something else. But after what felt like hours, we stumbled into the arms of a rescue team. The guide had noticed we were missing. They asked where we had been, but when we described the cavern and the river, they exchanged strange looks. "There's no water that deep on that side of the cave," one of them said. "That area is sealed off." I didn't argue, I just nodded. My brother and I haven't talked about it since. Sometimes I wonder if we really crossed that river, or if something crossed over into us.